The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Forge Fitness and Nutrition LLC, the podcast hosts, owners, employees, contractors, partners, or affiliates. This presentation may include the use of explicit language. Listener or viewer discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the Forge Fitness, Nutrition, and Habit podcast. I am Michael S. Parker. I'm the founder of Forge Fitness and Nutrition Coaching and the author of the 90-Day Habit Transformation, and recently certified as a GLP-1 Exercise Specialist through the National Exercise and Sports Trainer Association. Now, over the last 25 years, I've watched countless trends move through the fitness industry. Low-fat diets, low-carb diets, the detoxes and the fat burners and the meal replacement shakes, keto, fasting, wearable tech, whatever. Every few years, there's always this new development that captures the public attention, and it promises to solve all of your problems. And of course, you know, millions of people struggle. We've been struggling for decades with obesity and managing our well-being. And today, our conversation, it's just me talking to all of you about the truth about GLP-1 medications and what you need to know about weight loss, muscle preservation, and long-term success while using these drugs. It doesn't matter if you're on Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, it doesn't matter. Any of the medications in this category, they have fundamentally changed the weight loss landscape. There's no question about that. Physicians are prescribing these drugs in record numbers, and it's only going to grow. Patients are seeking them out. That's why. And of course, social media is flooded with all of these success stories, but then there's the cautionary tales. You have these crazy before and after pictures. Then you have Ozempic face, which is becoming a thing. And then there's all these dire warnings and the medical horror stories along with all the confusing options and opinions, mostly from people who have very little understanding or knowledge about these medications and how they actually work. Just, you know, like a typical social media influencer who is only click farming and begging for attention so you can buy whatever shitty product they're affiliated with or sponsored by while trying to pass themselves off as an expert. Anyway, as someone who has spent most of his professional life helping people improve their health through exercise, nutrition, and behavioral change, I think it's very important to have a balanced discussion about these drugs. And if you want to know about these GLP-1 medications, you're in the right place. Okay, so here's the thing. The reality is, I just mentioned it before, millions and millions of people are taking these things, and it's just going to grow. So as a fitness professional, pretending that they don't exist or just kind of dismissing them outright is not helpful. It's not going to be helpful for your clients. It's not helpful for you and your business, and it's definitely not helpful for your continuing education. As a fitness professional, you need to be open to, or at least aware of, the primary movers within the fitness, nutrition, and well-being space. So anyway, here's the thing, but at the same time, we can't treat these medications as this miracle solution that will eliminate your need for exercise, nutrition, and your long-term habit development. That is so misguided. And I know it's easy. We're Americans. We love instant gratification. We love to put out zero effort, and we want it for as free or cheap as possible. Anyway, the goal of today's discussion is to just cut through all the bullshit, the hype, and let's examine what the science actually tells us. There's plenty of reference material out there. There's so many studies, and they'll be also linked to this episode. We're going to actually take a transcript of this, and we're going to turn it into a blog post, and there will be a ton of references there as well. So if you guys want to deep dive, you're more than welcome. So these medications, they're clearly helpful. Even in our client base, we're seeing some clients with significant success, but they also create challenges. And I think I believe that's where coaching is more important than ever for individuals who are going to choose to use a GLP-1 or semaglutide. In fact, Forge Fitness and Nutrition Coaching has developed a GLP-1 support assessment calculator to help those of you who are using these medications to better understand your current status with your, I guess you say the drug that you're taking. You can project your hydration, your fitness and nutritional needs to support your efforts. You don't want to go catabolic. And we use this calculator to help people to quickly and reasonably assess where they're at in their dosage and we're not prescribing and we're not treating, none of that stuff. It's for fun, for education, and for entertainment. You can go and use this calculator. It's going to be linked and referenced in the video description box here, and it'll be available on the Forge PT website. So it's forgept.com. And essentially, if you're on one of these medications or you think you might be on one, and you can get an assessment as how much protein you need, how much hydration, how much sleep, and how much resistance training. Those are really critical, and we're going to get into that in detail here in a moment. So anyway, let's move on to this. One of the first things that we have to acknowledge is that these medications work. That's it. That may sound obvious, but it's worth emphasizing because much of the debate surrounding GLP-1 drugs has become ideological. You know, I hate that. Some drugs, or some people want to portray them as this disastrous shortcut and all of the things that implies. Others represent them as this revolutionary answer to obesity, and neither perspective fully captures the reality because the evidence supporting their effectiveness for weight loss is substantial. One landmark study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine examined semaglutides in adults with overweight and obesity, right? So researchers, what they did is they found that participants receiving the semaglutide experienced an average weight reduction that was approaching somewhere around 15% of their body weight, which significantly exceeded what was observed in the placebo group. That's really important. For many individuals, that level of weight loss is clinically meaningful, and it can lead to improvements in your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your mobility, and overall quality of life. More recently, research on tirzepatide demonstrated even greater weight loss outcomes, with some participants even achieving reductions exceeding 20% of their body weight. This is revolutionary. There are numbers that would have been difficult to imagine from a pharmaceutical intervention only a decade ago. We've tried this before. There have been medications in the past, particularly in the 80s and 90s, and they all got canned. So it's been a long time since anybody has produced something that has been this effective. There are side effects, but we'll get into that in a minute. But let's talk about these important points. These medications are not ineffective. They're not scams. They're not simply the latest fad. They represent a significant advancement in obesity treatment and metabolic medicine. They do. However, effectiveness and completeness are not the same thing. Weight loss is only one variable in a much larger health equation. When most people think about losing weight, they picture body fat disappearing, right? They think about a aesthetic outcome. They imagine a smaller waistline, looser clothing, and a lower number on the scale. What many people don't realize is that the body does not exclusively burn fat during periods of weight loss. Weight reduction often involves a combination of fat loss, water loss, glycogen depletion, and lean tissue loss, which we want to mitigate those risks. This distinction really matters because muscle is not merely decorative tissue. Muscle serves as one of the body's largest metabolic organs. Just look at the research done by Dr. Gabriel Line. It's overwhelming. Anyway, muscle contributes to glucose regulation, insulin sensitivity, movement efficiency, balance, strength, and physical independence. It plays a critical role on how well we function through our lives. It's so important. Plus, muscle action does help with bone. Anyway, when somebody loses significant amounts of muscle along with body fat, the scale may show success, while important aspects of health move in the wrong direction. So that's one of the concerns that deserves far more attention in the GLP-1 conversation. See, many people are familiar with the dramatic weight loss stories. You see it all over the place. You can't escape it. But fewer are aware that lean muscle loss can account for a meaningful percentage of total weight reduction. Yes, there's going to be some degree of lean tissue loss that occurs during almost any kind of weight loss intervention. That amount that is preserved or lost can be heavily influenced by your lifestyle choices. And that's the point of today's message. So before we go any further, it's worth asking a question that almost nobody seems to be talking about. Do you like that? It's my social media influencer hook. Why are so many people suddenly requiring medications that mimic a hormone our body already produces naturally? Has anyone thought about that? GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. It's not something pharmaceutical companies invented. It's a hormone that's produced primarily in the intestines after we eat. Its basic job is to help regulate your blood sugar. It slows stomach emptying, and it increases this feeling of fullness. And it communicates with the brain that we've consumed enough food. In many ways, a GLP-1 acts as one of the body's natural appetite management systems. So the interesting question is whether modern lifestyle may be reducing our natural GLP-1 response in the first place. Now, research is suggesting that obesity, insulin resistance, and poor diet quality over chronic consumption of highly processed foods, inadequate sleep, chronic stress, and let's face it, we don't move. There's a high level of physical inactivity, and it can all impair various appetite regulation pathways, including those involving a GLP-1. So in simple terms, many people who are living in environments that constantly encourage overeating while simultaneously weakening some of the biological signals that help regulate hunger and satiety, that's a problem. Think about how different the modern food environment is compared to what humans evolved with. Just think about what's changed since the 70s and the 80s. I remember growing up is when I started to notice the processed foods, hindsight really started to hit the market. So now today we're surrounded with hyper palatable foods engineered to be convenient, very calorie dense, and they're difficult to stop eating. That's why binging has become a serious problem. Snacking. Anyway, many meals, they contain very little fiber, inadequate protein, and are consumed rapidly, mostly while you're distracted. I'm always blown away watching people drive and eat. I don't understand that. We also have to examine sleep. Sleep deprivation has become just normal, and stress levels are quite elevated. Physical activity, it's always on a decline. I think that the organization that is used to be called IRSA, the International Racket Sports Health Club Association, did a poll. This is in the mid 2000s. And it was something like there's 50 million exercisers in the United States in the 1980s, and it's the same today. Nobody's really increased, because our population is flat. So this was also defined by people who exercise for 6 months or longer, just by the way. Anyway, all of the factors can influence the hormones that help regulate appetite. Good news is that while pharmaceutical GLP-1 medications can dramatically amplify the pathway, there are also evidence-based strategies that may help support your body's natural GLP-1 production. And one of the most effective is increasing dietary protein intake. So, and this is important no matter what. If you're on a GLP-1 pharmaceutical or if you're trying to increase your natural GLP-1, protein is going to be literally key. Protein-rich meals consistently produce greater levels of satisfaction and stimulate several hormones involved in appetite regulation, of course, including GLP-1. And dietary fiber appears to have a similar effect. I just did an entire expose on fiber in cancer. You can find that on the Forge blog, but fiber is also really important in this aspect as well. The reason is because when fiber is fermented, there's a beneficial gut bacteria, short chain fatty acids are produced, and that can stimulate your GLP-1 release. And this is another reason that diets that are rich in fruits and vegetables, legumes, and whole grains are consistently associated with improved appetite regulation. Complex carbs always beat simple carbs, unless you're an extreme endurance athlete and you need a good glucose boost. But regular exercise may also enhance GLP-1 activity and improve insulin sensitivity. We know that it improves insulin sensitivity for sure. And exercise isn't a magic bullet for weight loss by itself. You can't outwork a shit diet, but it does improve many of the metabolic processes that are going to help your body regulate energy, and it's going to balance more effectively. But sleep is another major factor. And there's lots of studies that have shown that insignificant sleep is going to alter your hunger hormone. It increases your craving and it impairs your appetite control. Not to mention, you just don't have the freaking energy to even do a workout. So many people spend a tremendous amount of money searching for advanced weight loss solutions while routinely getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night. So stress management does matter. Chronic stress can influence your eating behaviors, your food choices, and the hormonal environment surrounding appetite regulation. I write about that in the 90-Day Habit Transformation because it's a behavior. It's a habit-based thing, right? As managing our stress. It's just the power of conscious response. If you're interested in that, forgept.com, you can get my book. It's on Amazon. So anyway, nobody can eliminate stress entirely. I get that. I live it. But I've learned to manage it more effectively, and it has improved my overall metabolic health. I'm getting close to 50, so I'm having to be very, very conscientious about how my body's responding to the reality of aging. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that someone with obesity can just eat more vegetables, get more sleep, and expect the same degree of weight loss that a patient who's experiencing medications like a semaglutide would see. That's likely untrue. And because the data is showing that these medications produce effects that often exceed what lifestyle can change alone. And I think that that's why they're getting all of the attention. And this is the mistake, because people are like, oh, good, I don't have to change my shitty fucking behavior and I can just take a drug and then all my problems are solved. Incorrect. Because what I am saying is that understanding how the GLP-1 functions help us appreciate these medications. They're best combined with a very active lifestyle and behaviors that support your body's own regulatory system. You do not want to become dependent. Anyway, the medication, it's not replacing healthy habits. It should not be replacing your strength training. Ideally, it's creating an opportunity to reinforce them. That's how I look at it. If you're spending the money, you might as well do all the other stuff that's going to help you really see great results and forge a lifestyle, haha, pun intended, forge a lifestyle that creates sustainability. Why wouldn't you do that? Why are you throwing away your money? Why yo-yo? And that's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about people yo-yoing on Ozempic. I think most people understand that these medications are going to reduce your appetite, but many people don't know that they also indirectly reduce your fluid intake. Now, in my coaching experience, when people eat less frequently, they also drink less frequently. Meals serve as a natural reminder to consume fluids throughout the day. And when those meals become smaller or less frequent, hydration can suffer without people even noticing it. This becomes particularly important because dehydration will contribute to several symptoms: fatigue, headaches, dizziness. You definitely reduce exercise performance, constipation, diarrhea. I've heard some clients say they have difficulty concentrating. While these symptoms can have multiple causes, hydration status is often one of the very first variables that should be evaluated. So whenever I have a client who, whether they're on a GLP-1 or not, comes to me and they say that they're having some of the effects that I had just mentioned there, I say, well, how much fluid have you taken in? How much water are you drinking? 90% of the time, they're like, oh shit, I forgot about that. I had one client this one time. She's hilarious. I asked her how her hydration was going. And she's like, well, I've had 2 water bottles. So she picks up these, they're 8-ounce little plastic disposable water bottles. And I said, not even close. Not even close. And so her goal, I want her to 120 ounces for what her goal is. And of course she's on a semaglutide, but it is definitely something that you want to observe. Now, from a physiological perspective, water plays a critical role in every process that's related to your performance. Yep. It supports your blood volume, your nutrition, transport, your digestion, temperature regulation, joint lubrication, and of course, muscle function. Don't forget, your brain is an electrical system too. So anyway, when hydration levels decline, the body becomes less efficient at performing all these tasks. And for someone who's actively trying to lose weight and maintain muscle and improve their overall health, even mild dehydration can just become an unnecessary obstacle. Hydration becomes even more important when exercise is part of the equation. One of the primary goals I have for clients who are taking a GLP-1 medication is to preserve their lean tissue. And we do that through resistance training. And exercise performance is heavily influenced by hydration status. And research has repeatedly shown that even relatively small reductions in body weight can impair your strength, endurance, recovery, and cognitive function. So in practical terms, that means an individual who is underhydrated may find workouts feel pretty difficult and they're not enjoyable. Recovery definitely takes longer and your overall training quality will decline. So another issue that frequently emerges is constipation. The slower gastric emptying is one of the mechanisms through which the GLP-1 medications help regulate appetite and blood sugar. And while that does contribute to their overall effectiveness, it also increases the likelihood of gastrointestinal discomfort in a lot of individuals. So let me capstone this again. So protein, fiber, adequate hydration, and resistance training, right? This will really help. But also one of the simplest recommendations, by the way, that I make to clients when it comes to being intentional about hydration, rather than just relying on thirst, because thirst is not an indicator, particularly in busy adults who are focused on work, their family responsibilities, whatever your daily obligations are. I have found that establishing a hydration habit throughout the day is far more effective than trying to catch up, just chugging it all at night and having to pee at 4 a.m, because now you're ruining your sleep too. So after symptoms appear, the irony is that many people spend tremendous amounts of time discussing all these advanced nutrition strategies, right? Everybody wants to know about the supplements and, oh, what are my protocols? And they just overlook all the basic stuff. Everybody thinks that it has to be hard, right? If you've listened to me before, you know I say two things that bother me about the way that particularly Westerners consider fitness and nutrition. They think that fitness is supposed to hurt and be miserable, and that nutrition is about deprivation and being resentful. We make it hard for ourselves. We don't have to make it this hard, people. So I just wanted to kind of close in on the water thing here. Water is not exciting for a lot of people. I have a lot of techniques. There's a lot of ways you can use sodaed waters, meaning like a carbon-based, injector system. What are those called? Soda streams. You can get the 0-calorie seltzer waters. There's all kinds of amazing things that you can do to hydrate. And no, carbonated water does not reduce the effectiveness of hydration. That's been debunked a million times. I've heard people say that, and it's stupid social media crap. So we want to do everything we can to be performance enhancing. So every tool at your disposal, that's what we want to do, especially when you're taking a GLP-1 medication and you're experiencing all the negative consequences like fatigue, the headaches, the digestive issues, the poor workout performance, because you got no fuel. Then hydration has to be just probably the very first area that you evaluate. And like I said, there's so many different things that you can do to improve your hydration. There's even apps out there. I don't find them particularly useful, but some people do. So basically exercise and proper nutrition. So even if you're on a GLP-1, it comes back to the same fucking thing. You got to move more. You got to eat correctly, right? Nutritional density is very important, by the way. Coming back to some of the research, it's consistently demonstrating that resistance training is one of the most effective strategies for preserving your lean mass during periods of caloric restriction. This is no matter what. If I have a client who wants to lose body fat, yet simultaneously gain lean muscle tissue, I have seen it work before. You can balance that equation. Everybody's a little bit different. I've noticed it typically happens between 500 to 800 calorie deficits. So that would be on an active day. And then on a non-active day, I typically like clients to get a little bit extra nutrition, particularly through protein. Speaking of, adequate protein intake does help provide the building blocks necessary to maintain that muscle tissue when your weight is decreasing. And unfortunately, I've seen it personally that GLP-1 users face challenges in both areas. They're losing weight, but they're also losing muscle. So they're getting Ozempic face and that skinny fat, because these medications severely do reduce your appetite. I have a couple clients who literally are ill trying to eat enough food to hit their nutritional needs. That really sucks. They just forget. And then because there's no signal, and the joy is kind of sucked out of food. I don't know if you guys have seen those fun little social media ones where they show me making a sandwich on Ozempic, and it's like this tiny little, like a sandwich that would go in like a dollhouse or something like that. Anyway, starvation definitely fuels weight loss, right? Isn't that I always tell that when someone's on an extreme diet, usually they're in keto, but they're not in ketosis because they're still eating like 50 grams of carbs. Anyway, but their food intake, like their basal metabolic rate is let's say it's a lady and it's 1,300 calories. And that's her basal. And then she's telling me, she's like, oh, I'm eating 800 and I'm on keto. And I say, yeah, throughout history, starvation has been proven to be the most effective way to lose weight. So I'm not impressed when somebody tells me stuff like that, because starvation has always been proven to do that. Anyway, imagine trying to maintain a house while simultaneously cutting off the supply of construction materials needed for repairs. So eventually the structure is going to begin to deteriorate, and your body's the same way. I mean, we take better care of our cars in most cases than we do our own bodies. It's fascinating to me. Muscle tissue, it responds the same way. You got to give it the building blocks. That's as simple as that. And over the years, I've coached people through all kinds of transformations. Of course, it's all goal-based. Some have lost 20 pounds and others lost over 100. Some people who wanted to gain 5 pounds of muscle, and then some people who I've taken up to 40 to 50 pounds of muscle. I've worked with couch to 5Kers all the way up to figure and competitors and models and actresses and actors. Everybody's got a different goal, something that they want to accomplish, and you have to train accordingly. So you have to think about, when you're taking something like a GLP-1, it's a perfect time for you to change the way you live. Right? So you don't fall back into the old patterns. You have to learn how to navigate your food at home. You have to learn how to navigate restaurants. You have to develop consistency around your exercise, your sleep habits. You have to become aware of your emotional eating patterns, because they build routines. And you need to make sure your routines support your goals, or as I like to say, your intended outcome, meaning that you're doing it deliberately. It's conscientious. They're acquired skills. Because really, the challenge with any intervention that produces a rapid result is that it creates the illusion that the underlying problem has been solved. Because if someone has spent decades using food to cope, like say with stress or boredom, frustration, anxiety, whatever, reducing appetite does not automatically address the behaviors. The emotional instigators probably still exist. The environment that causes them probably still exists, which means those habits still exist. And if you'd like to learn how to change those habits, my book, The 90-Day Habit Transformation, is quite detailed on that topic. Now, again, this isn't a criticism of the medication. It could be a criticism of humanity, but it's just an acknowledgement, right? It's an acknowledgement of our physiology and the psychology, because they're not the same thing. One influences hunger, the other influences decision-making. So long-term success is going to require attention to both. You have to pay attention to both your physiological and your psychological status. Because this is where I often see a disconnect in social media discussions, because I want to talk about this. Most influencers focus almost exclusively on the medication itself, and then how they're, affiliated with somebody where you can go and get it online. Anyway, they debate the dose, the side effects, the weight loss percentages, whatever, conflicting studies, source wars, all that bullshit that I can't stand. And meanwhile, some of the most important questions just go unanswered because they're not popular. Right? Nobody wants to ask the questions. The questions that I ask are like, well, are people getting stronger? Are they healthier? Are they preserving their lean muscle? Are they consuming adequate levels of protein? And do they even know what that means? Are they developing sustainable behaviors? Are they learning the skills that will help them maintain the results 5 years from now? Those questions may not generate sensational headlines. Those questions typically aren't going to go viral, so nobody gives a fuck. But I do, because they're the questions that determine your long-term outcome. Another misconception that I encounter is the belief that exercise becomes less important when someone starts a GLP-1 medication. In reality, it's the opposite. As a matter of fact, I think it was back in 2024 when the medications were really being prescribed. I mean, it's worse now, but they're really picking up. Forge experienced client attrition. We had a handful of people leave early 2024, mid 2024. None of my clients left, but some of my other coaches had experienced attrition. Some clients actually canceled their coaching, and they said, and it's a paraphrase, but it's actually kind of close because I saw one of the messages. It said, now that I'm on, it was Ozempic. Now that I'm on Ozempic, I'm not going to need your services anymore because I've solved the problem. This person had not told her coach, which you have to tell your coaches. It changes the way we program people. She didn't tell her coach. She was, and this coach had already helped her lose 30 pounds. Okay. Think about that, folks. She was working with a Forge coach, lost 30 pounds for the first time in her life. She was in the best shape of her life. And then for a couple of weeks, she started taking Ozempic, and then the weight loss started happening even faster. And then she thought to herself, well, good. Now I can just take Ozempic and all of my problems are solved. And she literally canceled. What happened was 1 year later, she signed back up in January of 2025. I'll never forget it. And she said that she had, there was a significant side effect related to her pancreas and her kidneys from the Ozempic. So the doctors had recommended that she cycle off of it or abstain from it and return to her typical lifestyle management. When she came back to the coach, she had almost gained back all of her weight. and she was off Ozempic for 6 months. So she let 6 months go by before she got back with her coach. And she had to work so hard. The good news is that she lost that weight again. I'm trying to be careful who I say, because I don't want this person to feel like they're on blast, but you're on blast. Come on. It was ridiculous. Anyway, I think what I've seen when weight loss is it occurs rapidly. People just think, oh, good, well, I don't have to work out. It's unfortunate. I'm going to beat the shit out of this, because resistance training is going to provide a stimulus that tells the body to retain lean muscle. I should be clear about that, because it reinforces movement quality. It supports your bone health. It improves your functional capacity. It helps maintain strength while your body weight decreases. It improves your cardiovascular exercise. I should mention cardiovascular exercise. It's valuable as well. Improved cardiovascular fitness is always associated with better health outcomes across numerous populations, unless there is a pre-indicator. But I'm talking about generally healthy populations. You're not going to go wrong with having a healthy heart and pulmonary system, right? But if someone asks me where to place their emphasis, let's say I have a lot of clients who are physicians or lawyers and military. Sometimes their schedules are ridiculous and they have very finite amounts of time. I'm always going to put them in strength training. It's always going to be strength training. If they can do one or the other, it's going to be strength training, because I can be creative in program design with strength training and we can get a higher metabolic output. There's high intensity intervals that can be done. You can do supersets. You can do circuit training. These things all elevate heart rate higher than just for a standard like hypertrophy lift or a power lift, at least for an elevated period of time. And then of course you have the EPOC phenomenon. So the excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption, the glycolytic response, or the anaerobic response to the stress. All of these things are metabolically inspiring. Now, I think one of the problems that people have is that they're focused on the aesthetic, but we need to change this as a society and enjoy that the aesthetics are the natural byproduct of preserving our physical capacity, the ability to carry our groceries, climb stairs, lift luggage, play with the kids, grandkids, remaining independent and avoiding falls later in life. This all has it's invaluable, and muscle contributes to each and every one of those outcomes. And this brings me to another point. The ultimate goal should not to become lighter. The goal should be healthier. Those objectives usually overlap, but they are not identical. A smaller body does not automatically guarantee a healthier body. A lower scale weight does not automatically indicate improved function. Health is multidimensional. It's like our body. It's a transverse plane that we live in. It's 3D. It includes our strength, our mobility, our metabolic health, our cardiovascular fitness, and our physiological well-being, and the ability to participate fully in life. I'm living for my 70s, 80s, 90s, and however long I'm allowed to live on this earth. I don't have children, and I have property here that we're going to keep. And I want to be able to futz about when I'm in my 80s and 90s, and I want to be able to do it at a very high level. My goal is to be as functional as possible for as long as I possibly can. And I want to be a good looking man in his 80s and even in his 90s. I'm deeply inspired by men and women who choose to prioritize their future. But you're getting, see, here's the thing. If you're thinking about how you're going to function and look at 85, then you're going to be enjoying that at 45. I don't understand, people. So anyway, when I work with clients who are taking these medications, I'm trying to express that my focus is well beyond the number on a scale. In fact, I rarely care about the number on a scale. I use it for people who are severely overweight. You got a gentleman that I worked with who was over 400 pounds. Now he's back down to 280. But other than that, I don't look at scale weight. I want to know your body fat percentage. I want to know your lean muscle tissue. And I want to know how mobile, how stable, how flexible, how strong you are. Those are things that I care about. How do you function? How do you perform? That's it. I want to know whether or not your dietary intake is supporting your lifestyle, protein, hydration. I want to know more specifically, are you developing habits that are going to remain useful regardless of whether or not you continue to take the medication in the future? Because eventually every individual is going to face a fundamental question, which is, what happens next? What do you do after? You're going to be on it for the rest of your life? So for some people, these medications can become a long-term treatment strategy. I understand that. But for most people, I don't think it's going to be or should be. Regardless of the path that you choose, your long-term health still depends on the behaviors that occur between injections, prescriptions, your doctor appointments. It depends on what happens in the kitchen. It depends on what happens in the gym and in your daily activities. It's all about the choices that you make during your stressful weeks, the busy seasons, your vacations, holidays, unexpected life events. One of the things that really threw off Heather and my fitness and nutrition for just a small period of time was when her father was passing. It was very difficult. It was a huge life event. It basically slept on a floor for a month and a half to 2 months. The point being, yes, the medications can support these efforts, but it cannot replace them. And as somebody who has just recently completed specialized training in this area, I believe that the future of coaching will involve and should involve helping clients integrate medical interventions with evidence-based exercise, nutrition, and behavioral strategies. You got to be multifaceted as a coach now, because it's much more complicated than I just want to lose weight. I'm going to predict that the most successful professionals in this field will not position themselves as blindly for or against GLP-1 medications. I think that people who position themselves as knowledgeable, people who are guides, who understand how to maximize the benefits while minimizing risks, are going to be really helpful to the general population. In fact, frankly, that is the role that I and Forge Fitness and Nutrition Coaching and our whole team intend to play. If you are currently taking one of these medications, my advice is really simple. Focus on preserving muscle, prioritize resistance training, make protein intake a priority, pay attention to recovery, develop habits to support your goals. Let's use the opportunity. Let's leverage it. So you have this reduced appetite. Let's build healthier lifestyles rather than relying exclusively on medication. This just doesn't work that way. I understand they represent one of the most important developments in obesity treatment that we've probably ever seen. And that does deserve a serious discussion, but it also requires thoughtful implementation. And there's going to be ongoing research. And we're starting to see some stuff, pancreatitis, kidney problems. There are things that are happening to people on these medications. But at the same time, they need to be viewed as a tool. They're not a solution, folks. They're a tool. And the people who experience the greatest success are likely going to be those who combine all of these things together: the treatment with the intelligent training, the sound nutrition, and the change of the behavior. These combinations, they address not only the symptoms of excess body fat, but they invigorate a broader lifestyle. These factors that contribute to long-term health. So anyway, thank you for joining me on this discussion. If you found that this was valuable, share it with someone who is currently taking GLP-1 or considering to taking one. And if you are looking for professional guidance on how to preserve your muscle, improve your strength, and build sustainable habits, whether you're using these medications or not, just visit forgept.com to learn more about our coaching services. I am Michael S. Parker, and I will see you next time. Thank you for joining me today.